I guess a little lead into that is, yeah, we are going to talk about what happens when a bank forecloses and how that's going to affect your credit score. Um, I don't have a huge segment on that, but I do touch on it just a little bit in the short sale and the REO sections. So let me share my screen again. Uh, Hold on, I've got a ton of windows open here. Hold on. Let's see, that's this one. And share. Boom. All right. Perfect. All right. Short sales and REOs. Feel free to put your questions into the Q&A or into the comments. Either one works. Um, yes, I do have experience in these. For those that don't know, I started in this business in 2003. It was pretty great for a few years, and then we hit the crash. Right about '06, '07 was pretty bad, and then '08 just really got terrible. And I was actually in the Las Vegas market at that time, and so, I consider that kind of ground zero or one of them as far as foreclosures and short sales. I mean, that market just got annihilated. I moved back to California in '08 and was just kind of doing both states at the time, and Vegas was definitely a lot worse off. I mean, I pretty much that's all I sold on the buyer's end, and sometimes on the seller side too, but usually on the buyer's end was the REOs and the short sales. So, what has changed? Well, we haven't had a lot of these in recent years. The past decade or so, they've been pretty non-existent. I know consumers ask for them, um, but when the market is healthy, there's just not a lot of them around. So um, I decided to go ahead and do this topic. I usually do this one. I think I did it maybe a year or two ago, and kind of expanded it out a little bit further on this session to include short sale information because we've been starting to see these, and they're not that fun. It seems like banks have streamlined a little bit better on their processes with short sales from what I've seen on the broker end of the more recent ones that we have. But we're still processing these things through, servicing companies and through Equator and things like that. So seems like the process has definitely sped up a little bit. I remember, in the crash, some of these short sales would take, 6 months, 8 months to process easily, sometimes even longer. Some of that was the listing agents and experience. Some of it was just understaffing at the banks. I mean, they were busier than ever, losing money back then. And so they just didn't have enough, you know, resources to handle the volume that was coming through at that time. So we're not experiencing that right now, um, thankfully, because that was a tough market. And if anybody was in that market back then, I'm sure you can agree that was no fun. So let's start off with short sales 101 from the buyer side, buyer agent side. So again, like I'm saying, they've regained attention as the rising mortgage delinquencies push some homeowners to sell for less than what they owe rather than face a foreclosure. Short sale occurs when a lender agrees to accept less than the outstanding mortgage balance to release its lien on the property. For buyers and agents, these transactions offer potential value, but require patience, legal awareness, and careful risk management. Um, so what is a short sale for those that are wondering? Maybe you saw it in MLS or you've heard about it. Basically, a short sale is a pre-foreclosure transaction in which the lender allows the homeowner to sell the property for its current market value, even if that amount is, short of the mortgage balance. That's where the name short sale comes about, or selling the home short. This option lets the borrower avoid the stigma and cost of foreclosure while getting a non-performing loan off the lender's books, which is something they want to do. In a true short sale, the sales price doesn't cover all liens. Short sale occurs when title transfers and the sales price is insufficient to pay all mortgages and closing costs. And the seller doesn't bring cash to cover the difference. Typically, they don't have any cash in quotes. This is a hardship sale. Lender consent is required on these. The lender must approve the sale terms and agree to release its lien. Sellers should start negotiating early, although many lenders wait until there is a qualified buyer. Um, Deficiency is usually forgiven in California. California's anti-deficiency statute prohibits lenders from pursuing a deficiency judgment after a short sale of 1 to 4 unit dwelling when the lender has provided written consent and the sale proceeds are tendered as agreed. Junior lien holders that consent and receive their agreed proceeds are likewise barred from suing the borrower. And that was a real problem back in the crash too, is not everything was non-recourse, and so some of those lenders were planning to go after the homeowners for their loss essentially. So things have improved since the crash, and that is one thing I have noticed with the short sales and the REOs is it has improved. The banks aren't quite as willing to take back the property and you know, not try and work it out with the homeowner. So they are definitely more willing these days. Some of that is because of laws that got put in place. Credit tax and legal considerations. So debt forgiveness is not automatic. Sellers should get the lender's agreement to forgive any remaining debt in writing. And where would you find that? So when they approve the sale to be sold short, they will provide an approval letter. And in that approval letter, basically it has the stipulations of what they're agreeing to do. And in there should state that that it's non-recourse. So you'll want to look for that. It's more if you're on the listing side, not so much on the buyer side. But on the buyer side, I don't know. It could prevent the seller from even wanting to, proceed if they're still going to get, uh, you know, chased afterwards. So um, junior lien holders, so your first or your seconds, your thirds, things like that, may file a civil action if they don't agree to the short payoff. That is something you probably want to ask when you're on the buyer side. How many liens are there? How many are we dealing with here? Because a lot of times you'll see these short sales have more than one loan on them. It was a first plus a second, a third. We have one going right now that has four. It has a first, second, third, and fourth loan all taken out against the house. And so, I mean, it's a low chance of getting accepted, but we might get it done, but we'll see. Tax liabilities may arise, so forgiven debt can be treated as taxable income. The forgiven amount may be subject to state and federal tax. Sellers should consult a tax professional before agreeing to a short sale. Short sale versus foreclosure and credit reports. So according to a California Real Estate Education Journal, a short sale stays on the borrower's credit for 2 years, while a foreclosure remains for 7. This shorter penalty period is one reason why a lot of homeowners pursue a short sale. Um, there's lenders out there that'll actually loan on these pretty quick with documentation. So if the homeowner is selling short and it gets approved and the sale goes through, they could be back into a home in less than 2 years or getting in right around 2 years. So that is a benefit for them. Short sale process and timeline. So, I mean, there's no definite on this, so we're going to kind of, just go by general short sale processing timelines. So it involves more steps and longer time frames than a typical sale. Multiple parties, such as the seller, the lender, mortgage insurers, and sometimes even government programs must agree before escrow can close. The average short sale takes 3 to 5 months from initiation to close of escrow. The government programs has been an interesting one because we have one right now that is requiring at the last minute a walkthrough of the house, um, which I thought was kind of weird, but a walkthrough from the house because of the type of program uh, the home was in. So there is take all these things into consideration if you're working on either side, not just that the home is selling short, but again, how many liens are there? How many loans are there? Were they any sort of special government programs or anything like that? Because everybody has to prove to this stuff, and there may be extra steps. So a typical timeline, you have your third-party authorization. Typically, that's 3 to 5 days. That's essentially just the listing agent getting authorization to talk to the bank on the seller's behalf. Usually, this works through in just a few days. Gathering the mortgage assistance package. So sellers submit final financial documents, hardship letters, tax returns, and proof of income to show why they need a short sale. This is kind of similar to applying for a loan. So they're going to be gathering the same types of stuff in addition to the hardship letter. And the hardship letter is basically them pleading to the lender, stating, hey, I've been out of work, I can't find work, I was injured, something like that as to why they are not making their home payments and why they need uh, an approval to sell their home short. Lender review, 7 to 30 days. Yes, that's a kind of a wide gap. The lender's loss mitigation department evaluates the package, orders a broker's price opinion, which is called a BPO, and determines whether to move forward or not. Yes, 7 to 30 days. This could be depending on the servicer, the bank, how quickly they're processing things. Some of them will move fast, some of them will move very slow. There's a lot of red tape in the back end. They have their processes they have to go through. So yeah, it's kind of a wide gap there. Listing and marketing. The property is listed on the MLS at market value. Agents must market it like any other listing, and they may see multiple offers. 1 to 2 weeks depending on the market. Receiving and negotiating offers, 30 to 60 days. Buyers submit offers with proof of funds or pre-approval. The lender has final say on acceptance and may counter or reject, in quotes, accepted offers. Remember, just because the seller accepts an offer doesn't mean that the lender will. So you want to make sure that you're prepping your buyers. Hey, they accepted our offer. That's great. And the buyers may be very excited for the price that the seller accepted, but they have to remember that the seller doesn't really care at this point. They just want to get this thing done. So they're going to kind of accept whoever is the best buyer. And the buyer may not, when I say best, it may not be the highest price. It's who's going to stick around for this process, what type of financing do they have, things like that. So they want to find the best buyer that's going to hopefully be there with them at the end. The reason why you don't want to get them excited about the price that they just got their offer accepted with is because the lender may disagree based on their broker price opinion that they have or anything else. They may say that is too low. We believe we can get more for this house, and they may send a counter offer to the buyer later on, or they may request for more offers. So there could be many things that can happen. So while they might get that offer accepted, it might change. So you have to prep your clients for this. The short sale package preparation. This is going to be mostly on the listing side. Once an offer is accepted by the seller, listing agent submits a complete package to the lender, including the contract, the HUD-1 estimates, and seller financials. So all that stuff they got together, then it goes over, and it's going to start getting reviewed then. The lender decision, up to 30 days. Lender reviews the package, verifies property value, and issues an approval letter or denial. The one that's not in there is potentially a counteroffer. I have seen them say, hey, we're not going to accept that price, but we will accept this price. And if the buyer agrees, then it can proceed. Closing a settlement, 30 to 45 days. So once approved, escrow proceeds like a regular sale, but the buyer must meet the lender's time frame. Delays can occur if there are multiple loans, mortgage insurance, or investor sign-offs. The process can be longer if the loan is FHA or Fannie Mae. The lender receives lowball offers or if documentation is incomplete. Buyers and agents should build patience into their plans and avoid making firm moving arrangements until the approval letter is received from the lenders. So roles and responsibilities. So the lender and asset management. I don't think there's any questions. Okay, so I'll keep going. Lender and asset management. So the lender and or its servicer controls the short sale. A dedicated loss mitigation specialist or asset manager, that's usually what I refer them to, or as, reviews the seller's hardship package, orders valuations, and negotiates with the lien holders. Um, their objectives are to reduce losses, ensure compliance, and avoid fraud because these are susceptible to fraud. Um, the California DRE warns that only licensed real estate brokers or supervised salespeople may negotiate with lenders on a homeowner's behalf. Unlicensed short sale facilitators are illegal. So if uh, keep that in mind. If you see someone out there advertising, hey, I'll help you process short sales, things like that, make sure they're licensed. Same thing on the other end, know who you're dealing with there. Lenders may work with a short sale negotiator, a specialist who communicates between sellers, agents, and banks. Short sale negotiators are similar to like a loan processor or transaction coordinator in that they ensure all documents are complete, meet deadlines, and clearly represent the seller's hardship. They help prevent delays by communicating directly with lenders, resolving title lien issues, and coordinating with escrows. I think they're very similar to a loan processor. So if anybody here processes loans, a short sale negotiator is very similar. They're usually very proficient in dealing with some of the portals that you're processing these through, such as Equator. And they know how to deal with these asset managers a little bit better than the typical agent because the asset managers are very cut and dry. So they know how to deal with a lot of them, and different banks and servicers process these a little bit differently. So on the buyer's agent side, representing a short sale requires diligence, communication, and realistic expectations. Buyer's agent should verify the short sale status. I would do that first if you see one listed in MLS. Confirm the homeowner has begun the short sale process and that the lender is open to an offer. Ask whether there is already a submitted offer or an approval on file. So potentially this could be a lot further along. Maybe they got to the approval part. It wasn't at the price that the original buyer wanted, or maybe the original buyer already went and found another house. And so there's an approval on hand. Those are great because you can get your offer in and escrow is not going to drag on too much longer than your typical, 30-ish days escrow because you already have the approval. They just need to switch out the buyer, reissue it, and then it should be good to close. Gather financial documentation. Buyers must present strong pre-approval letters or proof of funds. Lenders want to see capable buyers. So I wouldn't recommend these necessarily for first-time buyers or with government loans because if, adverse findings come back on the home inspection, this could the lender's probably not going to fix anything. So that could affect the ability for the buyer to close on that particular loan product. So typically, the listing agent's going to be looking for a conventional offer or preferably cash is what they're looking for. Educate clients about timelines and risks. So prepare buyers for long response times, possibility of rejection, and as is conditions. Set realistic expectations about price and closing dates. I never really liked this term as is conditions because our purchase agreement states that the home is in as is condition. Every home is as is. However, what they're saying here is uh, the lender's not going to come back and say, okay, we'll fix the roof leak and the peeling paint and these other things like that. They're just not going to do that kind of stuff. It would be very far and few between that they do. I'm not saying it's impossible or it never happens. I have seen it happen, but I would not set that expectation with your client whatsoever. Um, Coordinate inspections and due diligence. Even though the home is sold as is, buyers should conduct thorough inspections. Banks rarely agree to credits or repairs. Again, back in the day, when these were really prevalent in our marketplace, yeah, I saw it occasionally because there were so many and the banks were really just trying to get stuff off their books. These days, it's not quite as, uh, you know, serious out there. So, I think the bank, I don't know, maybe if you're dealing with any, let me know. Have you seen any, REOs or short sales that you're working with approve any repairs? Because I haven't seen any recently, but if you have something different, definitely throw it in the chat so we can all learn. Stay in constant communication. So follow up the listing agent or negotiator regularly to ensure all lender requests are answered promptly. Keep your client's loan officer in the loop and maintain rate locks and financial or financing approvals. So don't assume, we are the facilitators of the transaction on the buyer's agent side. So we want to make sure that things are progressing along. You don't know who you have working on the other end there, and you do want to make sure that they're doing what needs to be done to move this property along. So definitely check in. Sellers agents. Agents representing sellers in short sales must be licensed and should have experience in distress sales. Their duties include pricing the property accurately, marketing aggressively, and assembling a complete short sale package for the lender. The DRE emphasizes that real estate licensees must not delegate negotiations to unlicensed third parties and warn of criminal penalties for unlicensed activity. Agents should advise sellers to seek legal and tax advice regarding deficiency and tax consequences. Um, I put that in there on the seller side just because on the buyer side, again, we need to know who we're dealing with on the other end as well. So these are questions that you may want to ask, or if you suspect something is just kind of off about the transaction, you may want to dig in a little bit because, again, the short sales are susceptible to fraud. So we want to make sure that everything is on the up with these. Risk for buyers, short sale properties can offer discounts, but buyers must be aware of unique risks. So delays and uncertain approval, short sales can take months to close. Buyers wait 30 to 90 days or even longer for a lender decision and still have their offer rejected or superseded by another buyer. Buyers should avoid expensive inspections or appraisals until the lender indicates serious interest and should remain flexible on closing dates. The best option is to wait until the approval letter has been granted from all of the lien holders before you start your timelines with your appraisal and things like that. Now, I say that with a bit of caution because sometimes, there's a notice of trustee sale already set on these, which we'll cover later. And if there is, and it cannot be prevented, the foreclosure sale and the approval comes out, and you've got 2 weeks until this trustee sale, and the lender's saying, no, we're not gonna extend it. Well, you know, be mindful of how that is progressing and keep in communication with your clients as to the risk of proceeding with inspections and appraisals prior to having the approval. So you'll want to just, be in good communication with them to see if they want to risk that kind of stuff to meet that foreclosure date, just in case. As is condition repair costs, short sales are almost always hold, again, as is in quotes, meaning the seller lender won't pay for repairs or warranty items. The issue you're going to see with short sales more often than not is deferred maintenance. It's very common because sellers are often in financial distress, so they have not been keeping the house up as it is. So, but encourage your buyers to budget for immediate repairs and consider a home warranty to mitigate surprises. An inspection contingency is essential to protect the buyer. Again, there could be a lot of hidden things going on. Something that I found out a lot is, especially on ones that have been vacant, is water issues. After the water starts running at the house again, if the home's been vacant for any period of time, it's in a dry area potentially, or a dry hot area, all the little seals start, you know, breaking on the valves and on the plumbing fixtures. And usually for the home inspection, they seem to be okay. And then after the buyer gets in there after a couple weeks and starts using it, all these seals really start deteriorating, and all of a sudden there's a bunch of water leaks behind the walls. So these are things I like to, talk to the buyers about, that deferred maintenance can be a real issue on these post-closing. Title and lien complications. And one of these pop up on Friday, actually. There may be more than one loan on the property or outstanding liens for taxes, HOA dues, or utilities. Subordinate lien holders who aren't paid in full may sue for deficiency. Order a preliminary title report early and verify that all liens will be satisfied through escrow. You may want to, reiterate with the listing agent after you review the prelim that they are addressing each of these liens that are, showing up on the prelim. Fraud and unlicensed negotiators, be warned short sale flipping schemes. So unscrupulous agents or negotiators may misrepresent the property's value, use straw buyers, and resell at higher prices, increasing the seller's tax liability. Buyers should work with experienced licensed agents to avoid anyone who will charge upfront fees, which are illegal, or guarantees approval. All payments must be disclosed in escrow, and advance fees must be handled in a trust account. Financing challenges. Lenders scrutinize the buyer's financing on short sale. May require larger down payments or cash offers. May not allow certain loan types. So, if you have a VA or FHA buyer, I wouldn't necessarily recommend them for a short sale. A foreclosure, yes. Short sale, these are not typically the best properties for them. Tenant rights. So if the property is tenant occupied and you're in a short sale transaction on the buyer side, the buyer must honor the lease and comply with state notice requirements. California law requires a 60-day to terminate, a month-to-month tenancy when the tenant has lived there for a year or more, and a 30-day for tenancies under a year. So if there happens to be a tenant in there, no, the tenant has the same rights, so the new buyer will need to honor that. Um, let's see. So best practices and expectations for buyers agents. So educating clients about the process is really, I think, the number one thing you should do in these so they can decide for themselves if they want to get involved with this short sale transaction. It could be a long escrow, and that could be something that they're really not looking for. They may say it's okay right now, but I wouldn't try and fluff it up too much because these can really drag, especially if they start hitting any kind of snags or additional liens start popping up on title and stuff like that. So really vet your buyers well because we want them to stick through to the end if possible. Get pre-approval and proof of funds early. Lenders will not consider offers without proof of funds or the ability to close. Review the short sale listing carefully, and again, determine if there's multiple loans going on. Those are going to probably take longer than one with just a first. Truthfully, I would probably steer clear of ones with multiple loans. They have a high failure rate, actually. I'm not saying they're impossible, but they do have a high failure rate. Ask if the HOA payments are behind. A lot of times they are. There could be a lot of things going on here. So write a complete and clean offer. I wouldn't ask for credits and things like that. Make it as neat and clean as you can when you write the offer. Um, do the lenders pay compensation? Um, yes, I mean I typically see anywhere from 2 to 3%, being paid by the lenders. So just ask for your compensation. It'll get negotiated out, just like it does with all these other offers. And yes, they will, on the vast majority of the time, pay compensation to the buyer's agent. Um, Stay organized, communicate regularly with both sides. Your client, make sure they're hanging in there, see how they're feeling about the transaction, after it's been a month and a half, 2 months, and there really hasn't been, much going on. Check in with them, make sure that they're still engaged. Make sure they're not out there looking for other properties too with another agent, depending on how your buyer rep agreement is. Protect your buyer with contingencies. Yes, they should still do investigations and have their loan contingencies in place and all that regular stuff. Prepare for potential rejections. again, that could come up. The bank could say this offer is not good enough. We want a higher offer. And you might want to prep your buyer with that ahead of time. Hey, I know we're offering this. I know they accepted this. In the event they come back 10,000 higher, what would your reaction be? Would you still move forward? Things like that. So you'll want to find that kind of stuff out. Address tenant issues early if there are tenants in place. You'll want to get that addressed. Will they be moving out? Will they be, essentially conveying with the property, so that you can prep your buyer for that. And then documenting everything, just as you should with everything, just document as you move along. Um, Document your emails. I keep email folders of everything plus document file. So chat, looks like a couple came in. So regarding taxable income, did the previous protections from debt forgiveness being taxable event from the 2000 crash have a sunset clause? Not that I know of. I can dive deeper into that. I did this mostly on the buyer side. Are we back to telling people that the amount of debt forgiveness may be taxable event as income automatically? I would have them talk to their CPA. I always refer them there, because some of that could just depend on what the lender is willing to do with their approval letter, um, especially on the seconds and thirds, the junior lien holders. Those are the sticky ones, that get a little nasty sometimes. How does the BRBC apply to these types of sales? Because the max, yep, so you'll need to do an extension of your BRBC. So if you write it for the 90 days and you're in this transaction and your BRBC is coming up for expiration, you can simply do an extension for another 90 days on it. You don't have to write a new BRBC or anything like that. Use Form MT-BR to modify your buyer rep agreement to extend it out. All right. Um, REOs. So what is an REO? We'll do a 101 from the buyer side. So up to, again, the past few years, I've really only seen a couple of these, and they were both HUD sales. Um, and for some reason this year, we already have, I think, 3 or 4 of these in the pipeline. So there's definitely been a little bit of an uptick in this, or maybe we just have clients searching for these a little bit more, uh, or a little bit of both. So REO stands for real estate owned, which is a property the bank takes back after foreclosure. REO sales run differently from traditional resale because you're dealing with an asset manager who answers to investors and follows strict protocols. This is very similar to the short sale side. A clear understanding of the foreclosure timelines, the rights of tenants of foreclosed homes, and banks' own processes will help you advise clients to protect them from surprises. So the foreclosure timeline in California. So this is a non-judicial foreclosure state. Most deeds of trust include a power of sale clause allowing the lender to foreclose without going to court. Here are the statutory timelines of the foreclosure process. Why is this important? Well, because if you're dealing with a short sale, you can figure out what process they are in here to know, how the impending foreclosure, how soon is it coming up, so uh, that will kind of help you determine as well, if that house would be worth offering on. Right now we're going to be talking about foreclosures that are ready for sale, but here's the events that led up to it. So pre-foreclosure contact. Before recording any notice of default, the lender must try to contact the borrower at least 30 days in advance to discuss alternatives like loan modification or repayment plans. If a full loss mitigation application is submitted, the foreclosure may be postponed until the lender issues a decision. Um, this could also be, short sale process working right here too. Notice of default, the NOD. If no agreement is reached, the lender directs the trustee to record a notice of default. This document officially starts a foreclosure and must be mailed to the homeowner within 10 days. From the recording date of the NOD, the borrower has 3 months to reinstate, or the cure period. to bring the loan current. Notice of sale, NOS, sometimes also referred to as NOT or NOTS, which would be notice of trustee sale. That's how I've always kind of known them as. After a 3-month cure period, the lender can instruct the trustee to record a notice of sale. The NOS must be recorded at least 21 days prior to the auction and must be mailed to the owner, posted on the property, and published in a local newspaper. The borrower may reinstate the loan until 5 days before the sale and can redeem the property by paying the full amount owed until the moment of the sale. The trustee's sale, so at auction, property is sold to the highest bidder. If no one outbids the lender acquires the property with a credit bid and it becomes an REO. In a non-judicial foreclosure, the lender cannot pursue the deficiency judgment on a purchase money loan. So if that homeowner used a purchase money loan, just as a regular loan, conventional financing or anything like that, that they used to purchase the home, then they cannot seek recourse. Let's say the home was paid off and then they took out a huge second. Well, that would be different then because that is not purchase money. Post-sale occupancy. Once a sale is complete, the new owner must serve occupants with 3-day notice to quit, which is typically the bank, and may not simply change the locks. A formal eviction is required. Homeowners Association foreclosures. Yes, they can foreclose on your home. Differ slightly as homeowners have 90 days after the HOA sale to pay off debts and reclaim the property. All right, tenant rights after foreclosure. This was a real problem actually in the crash because the tenant landlord laws were not the same, and tenants were getting booted out. They didn't even know the home was in foreclosure, and they would foreclose, and the banks would basically come and say, "You got to go." And so it was pretty sad because a lot of these tenants ended up being, you know, uh, victims, I guess, or of the seller's actions, and the seller was collecting a rent payment from them, which is actually also illegal now during this time, and then not making their home payment. So a lot of laws changed coming out of that crash. So when a tenant occupies a foreclosed property, they have specific protections under both state and federal law. Agents should understand these rules to set proper expectations for buyers and avoid wrongful evictions. Honoring existing leases, same as the short sales. In most cases, new owner, meaning the bank, must honor the existing lease. Month-to-month tenants and certain other leases can be terminated, but the tenant must receive 90-day notice. Exceptions exist when the new owner intends to occupy the property. Proper eviction procedure, bank's going to have to properly evict them. Cash for keys, you will see banks do that, offer a cash for keys agreement. That's fairly common because they do want to get these properties onto the market. How banks handle the REO property. So once property goes back to the bank, it is assigned to the asset manager. The asset manager is responsible for safeguarding the property, complying with local ordinances, and selling the asset for the best possible price. Initial inspection and securing. So what's going to happen after it's foreclosed? Shortly after the sale, the foreclosure sale, the bank or its contractors perform a property preservation inspection. They change the locks, they winterize the plumbing, they board up broken windows and begin lawn maintenance. This protects the asset from vandalism and code violations. Repairs and maintenance, the asset manager orders repairs to make the home safe and marketable, such as roof patches, drywall paint, appliance removal, trash haul-offs, and landscaping. Major renovations are rare as banks generally aim to stabilize rather than upgrade. Contractors must follow all health and safety codes and keep records of these expenses. So this is typically what you see, if you're on the listing side and you've been able to, develop a relationship with a bank and get assigned these REOs. This is all stuff that they're typically facilitating at that time, is getting the property ready for market and advising the asset manager on basically the minimum things that need to be done to make this property marketable for the best possible price. Valuation and pricing. So agents hired by the bank perform broker price opinions, BPOs, and occupancy checks within 24 hours. The asset manager reviews these reports and sets a list price that reflects market value, typically not at a bargain. Banks often list near market value and would decline lowball offers. Uh, Typically they will be just ever so slightly below market value. Um, so they can be a deal, but truthfully, they end up selling pretty close to market value most of the time. Marketing and offer process. Once listed in the MLS, REO will note specific offer instructions. Buyers must follow the submission procedure exactly as instructed by the listing agent in the MLS. Uploading offers to an online portal or emailing with required addenda is common. Asset managers review offers in batches and may respond slowly because they handle multiple properties. So I typically see a 2 to 4 day turnaround on getting a response on an offer. Bank addendum and closing. When a buyer's offer is accepted, so basically you took your purchase agreement, you submitted everything over into the portal, the bank sends what's called a bank addendum. And essentially it's another purchase agreement. But it's one that the bank had created. So we call this the bank addendum. That's what you're actually going to sign. And some of those terms in there could be different from your purchase agreement. Um, a lot of times what I see is I will see some asset managers negotiate verbally. Some of them I will see through a portal until there's an agreement. They'll have the purchase agreement come through, and then they'll send the bank addendum. The buyer will need to sign that. You'll want to read through that because that is not a standardized form. So you'll want to read through that, especially with earnest money and how the disposition of earnest money is handled. So don't assume it is going to mimic how the RPA is written and how the typical contingencies work. So they work a little differently in these bank addendums. So pay special attention to the earnest money, contingency timelines, and also the closing costs and who is paying the closing costs, because that also may not mimic what you wrote in your RPA or what is customary for your area. Um, so the addendum supersedes parts of the original purchase contract and oversees closing deadlines, and covers closing deadlines, late fee penalties, earnest money deposit terms, and allocation of closing costs. Buyers must sign and return the addendum promptly. Banks often refuse to pay seller escrow or title fees, but may offer a credit if there are competing offers. The bank addendum is generally created to be enforceable in any market across the U.S., which is why they tend to not pay for, the customary closing fees, as that varies by region. So what they try to do is have this bank addendum that they can use in any state, any region across the U.S. without having to comply with local customs. So basically, it's on their terms. So they use this in basically all states, and that's why it looks the way it does and why they pay the fees the way they do. Limited disclosures. Banks are exempt from the California Sellers Transfer Disclosure Statement, the TDS. Asset manager will not complete the usual seller disclosures and may stamp them seller exempt. I mean, they literally will just stamp it. They may line through it. They'll do something, but typically they're not going to fill them out. Buyer side and listing agents must still provide their own disclosure statements and visual inspections. Always document this exemption in your file. So this is something to prep your clients for as well, as far as the exemptions go. Something I guess I didn't touch on the short sales, they are not exempt. They require all the same disclosures as your resale home. What this means for agents dealing with REO is about process and patience. Asset managers don't negotiate like homeowners. They work from spreadsheets and policies with no emotion involved. So they have monthly quotas and often aim to close by the end of the month. Expect slower responses, limited negotiation, and corporate approval language in every counteroffer. Prep your client for these types of realities if they're buying, an REO property. Risk management for home buyers, very similar to the short sale. An REO can be a good deal to manage the risks. Banks aren't trying to give away properties. They're trying to recover as much loss as possible, same as the short sale. So they're not just trying to get these things off the books. They have to satisfy their investors as well, and they have processes in place that show the investors that, hey, we did our best to get the absolute highest price for this property to recoup your losses. So just remember, they're very systematic and they go through a process on these. Um, Key risk management points: don't assume it's a bargain. So just because it's foreclosure doesn't mean it's a bargain. REO homes often list at near or market value. Banks will turn away lowball offers and may wait for an owner-occupied buyer with FHA financing, something different than a short sale. Do a comparative market analysis and make sure the price reflects the home's condition. And some programs are out there, such as Home Steps and the HUD home product. Those are typically like neighborhood stabilization type programs where they'll take these REOs and they'll say, okay, we're going to put this one into the home path or home steps. And what they are looking for an owner occupant buyer. So they are totally fine. And they even have special financing for those. They want an owner occupant in there because they're trying to stabilize the neighborhood. And they feel that by putting owner occupants in these homes, that is better for the neighborhood. So that's what those programs typically are. As with any property, inspect thoroughly. I really recommend having the plumbing checked out very thoroughly, because that's where I usually saw post-closing complaints was, hey, the water started leaking behind the wall, and it's all because these valves dry out and stuff like that if the home's been vacant for any significant amount of time. Understand limited disclosures. Without a TDS, you must rely on your own investigations. As with any property, buyer responsible to investigate as usual. Um, Ask the listing agent for any existing inspection reports, past certifications, repair notices, things like that. They're probably not going to have any, but ask anyways. It doesn't hurt to ask. Remember that banks and agents may underestimate problems, so get everything in writing as usual. Verify clean title. More often than not, you're not going to have an issue with these. I'm sure things have happened out there, but of all the REOs I sold on the buyer's end, I never had any title issues or anything like that. They do research those pretty thoroughly, and they typically won't put them on the market until any clouds on title are resolved. So that's pretty typical, although things can pop up. Budget for repairs and holding costs, plan for slower closings. They can still close in 30 days typically, but you need to be very proactive as you're going through and get your inspections done as quick as you can. Get all, if there's going to be any sort of renegotiation, get that done as soon as you can. Um, the biggest thing is at the end of the transaction. That's really where you want to pay attention to, because the asset managers have to sign off on everything at the end, including the final estimate statement, the final closing statement. Um, so plan for an extra day or two in the closing process of what you're used to, because everything is still having to go through the asset manager again. So I recommend keeping the lender informed and having them on a closing time frame that is maybe a day or two ahead of what the contract closing date is, because you want to make sure that the lender knows that there could be a delay of a day or two in here waiting for the bank to give their final approval. Um, Evaluate financing. So many REOs actually qualify for conventional and FHA loans and VA and all that stuff if the home is livable. But some banks require cash or private financing on properties needing major repairs. those are out there, but there's plenty of these that can be financed. I think they're great for first time, home buyers or owner occupant home buyers because they're getting a little bit of a discount. A lot of times they have what's called a first look, meaning that they're not even going to sell to an investor for the first 14 days. It has to be on the market, and they are seeking an owner-occupied buyer. And if none of those come in during the first 14 days, then they'll open it up for investment. Best practices for agents. I'll try and get this pretty quick. So when you're working with REO buyers, read the MLS instructions. A lot of times these do have multiple offers on it, and if you are not following the instructions in the MLS, you can just count on your offer either not being, basically not getting responded to. If it's an incomplete offer, if you don't have everything in there, if you didn't submit everything they wanted, plus the addendums that were in the portal, then it's just not going to happen, So the listing agent is probably busy. The asset manager is busy. They're not going to wait around for you to get your stuff together. So give them a full package in the beginning, everything they're asking for. So be very thorough in the instructions part. Um, don't be afraid to ask the listing agent though, because again, these haven't been very prevalent in the market. And if you're unfamiliar with it, just ask the listing agent, where do you want me to submit? What's the website? Is there an extra addendum involved? Because sometimes there are. Again, educate your client on all these same things, timelines, um, potential actual condition of the property. Um, Warn them about, deferred maintenance leading up to the sale of the property. Plus, it's sitting vacant for potentially, many months. I mean, I saw them sometimes they'd sit for a year or two back in the day, but I don't think that happens so much anymore because they are processing these much faster. But it may have sat for several months vacant. So, um, stay organized, coordinate inspections quickly, get those done as quick as you can. Um, there might be shorter timelines in that bank addendum, so be aware of those. Um, yeah, all basically the same stuff as short sales. So, and finally, where to find REO and short sale property. So if you have clients looking for these things, and we all tend to have some sort of client saying, I only want to buy a foreclosure, I want to buy a short sale or something like that. And they have a deal. That's what they're really looking for is a deal, right? And this may or may not be a deal. Um, but here are websites where you can go. Most of the time, these are also in MLS, but not every single one of them. The Freddie Mac Home Steps and Fannie Mae Home Path. Those are great those are great programs. I really like those programs a lot, actually. They have a good program for the first time buyers, a good loan program available. Same thing with HUD, the HUD Home Store. So there's first time buyer loans available for all of those homes that are in those products. But you can go on there on any one of those websites and you can see exactly what's for sale. You can make your bid, you can offer straight there. Auction.com, Hubzu, Zome. You'll see short sales on those sites as well. Realty Bid, USDA, RDFSA, resales, FDIC property listing site. You can go direct to Bank of America Real Estate Center. So some of these major banks do service their own loans in the loss mitigation department as well. So they don't send them off to a third party servicer. So other specific REO portals for Wells Fargo, Fifth Third Bank, things like that. And then Equator and Service Link. So Service Link's like a servicer. Um, they process a ton of short sales and things like that. That's usually where I would um, uh, have to process them as well as Equator. So you can go there as well. So I don't know if we have any other questions that came in. But let's see. Got one. Curious to see how banks handle the BRBC. Oh, we already did that one actually. Yeah, actually we didn't. Their goal is to reduce costs in the past. I really haven't seen them balk at the commissions too much. on what's being asked. But if anybody has any insight on that, pop into the chat. But I really haven't seen them balk at what you're asking for, unless it's, something ridiculous. But they typically pay you know, a good compensation amount. So I wouldn't assume that you need to come in low, I guess is my point. So yeah, that's all I have for today. Hopefully it was somewhat informative. If you have any of these come up, if you have questions on it, let me know. Again, I would not say I'm an expert in these. I used to be an expert in these because that's all I sold for many, many years. But I would say I'm, I guess kind of rusty in the sense that we just haven't had any, these haven't been prevalent in the market. So, but as we've had a few of them processed, it's all kind of come back around. I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about these things. So, but the process has been, pretty much the same as how I remember it, except the timelines have been a little bit better on the ones that we've been a part of. Um, they don't seem to be dragging nearly as long as they used to. So I think that banks definitely learned their lesson back in the days and made things a little bit more streamlined for themselves, have better processes in place. And I think mostly they're just not as overwhelmed as they used to be. So, yeah, so that's short sales and REOs 101. If you have any questions on anything, always give me a call. Otherwise, hope everybody has a great week, and we'll see you next week. Talk to you later. Thanks, Julie. Hopefully I brought back good memories, not bad ones.